Okay, welcome to our class today. This is the introduction to the teachings of the Buddha course. It's just a 3-hour course. It's going to introduce you guys to the teachings of the Buddha and helping you get started at the very beginning. The way that we start our class is we start with some meditation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some chanting and kind of ease us into meditation. You guys have been here before, so you understand about chanting and meditation. For those of you guys online, I'm just going to be chanting in order to ease us into meditation, and then I'll give you some guidance once we get into the meditation itself. So take whatever position's comfortable for you, and then I'll give you some guidance once we're in the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะกะวะโอตังมะกะวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหากวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหากวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys, including those of you guys that joined us after we started meditating, and everyone online. Welcome to everyone. Today is just a short little course to give you guys an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. Over the next couple of hours, I'm going to help you guys to get acquainted with the teachings of the Buddha. And by the time we finish, I'm going to share with you the very first teaching of the Buddha, which is to help you to be able to understand what the problem is in the unenlightened mind, what the cause of that problem is, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is the first teaching you would learn to be able to get onto the path to enlightenment. But before we get into that, let me just share some introductory things to help you guys understand a bit about the Buddha and his teachings and so forth. First, let's just talk about what a Buddha is, because being introduced to the teachings of the Buddha, you might have a question like, well, what is a Buddha? What is this? So what a Buddha is they meet three main criteria. The first one is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. What enlightenment is enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, content with joy. You no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment. All of these discontent feelings are eliminated through training of the mind. So an individual who becomes a Buddha, they can accomplish this by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's the first criteria. The second criteria of what a Buddha is that they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. And then the third criteria is that by the time this person has died, they would have preserved their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three main criteria of what makes a Buddha, is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's life. And then they preserve their teachings so that other people can get to enlightenment after their death. So you can get to enlightenment, but by that time you won't be an actual Buddha. You'd be an enlightened being, and your mind would be peaceful and joyful. Everything would be at ease. Your mind would be fully awake. You wouldn't be experiencing difficulties and struggles and complications and all these different kinds of things. There's some other criteria of what makes a Buddha as well. A Buddha has a profound memory. In fact, this is the reason why they're able to get to enlightenment by themselves, is the average human being, they have ability to remember and retain certain amount of things, where a Buddha, or even a person who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limitation. You might think about it like a hard drive on a computer. A computer has a certain size of hard drive, maybe 500 gigabytes, a terabyte, what have you. And then once you reach capacity, the hard drive, you need to delete old files and store new files. And this is why, if you think about the last 5 or 10 years of your life, you pretty much remember the things that you've been doing over the last 5 or 10 years. But if you go back to your childhood and you think about your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete those files in order to store new files that you're now experiencing these new things. But a person who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. They can remember countless details about their current life, in their past lives too. So they accumulate all this wisdom into their last life, where now they can get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or guides, because their mind has been able to retain and memorize and remember and recall certain things that they learned along the way, certain wisdom that they acquired along their life. So they have this profound memory, unlike other humans. They also can quickly determine the condition of somebody else's mind through just being with that person and observing that person's mind. And a Buddha only does this as a way to help their students. So even though a Buddha can observe the qualities of other people's minds, they don't just step into somebody's life and say, oh, by the way, you should do this or you should do that. Instead, they're able to observe the quality of their students' minds, and then they're able to help them with teachings to be able to then get to enlightenment. And this is one of the real profound qualities and the powers of an actual Buddha, is that people don't actually know who a Buddha is. It's not like their ears turned a certain way or their nose is turned a certain way or there's a certain mark on their forehead. So it's not like there's a physical feature that determines who a Buddha is. It's based on these criteria here. So by people not knowing who a Buddha is, a Buddha can actually be more effective, because people, if they all knew who a Buddha was, they might be on their best behavior when they're around that person. Whereas if an individual who's a Buddha can actually observe the quality of people's minds and then be able to help them, they're actually much more effective, because what a Buddha is looking to do is try to help others get to enlightenment and bring the teachings into the world in such a way that countless people can get to enlightenment. So having this ability to be able to observe people's minds and help them with teachings is one of the profound qualities of a person who's an actual Buddha. And then lastly, a person who's a Buddha, they have a deep practice of their teachings. They're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They don't teach one thing and then do something different. They're actually a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. We might say you practice what you preach, but a Buddha doesn't preach. But you understand the analogy that this is essentially what a Buddha is that they understand that while people are learning from their spoken words, students are also learning from their actions as well. So a Buddha is going to be a very deep practitioner of their own teachings, because their students can observe them and learn how to practice the teachings through observation of their actions. So a Buddha is going to teach, yes, through their spoken words, but they're going to actually be practicing these teachings through their actions as well. So these are the main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. So now that you'll know what a Buddha is, we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. And that's because they don't have any teachers or any guides. So they're fully, perfectly enlightened, meaning if a Buddha tried to do a particular meditation and it worked to be able to get to enlightenment, then they know that this is part of the teachings. But if they tried a certain meditation and it didn't work, they would discard it. They would get rid of it. They wouldn't continue to practice it. Where somebody else who maybe will learn from a teacher, they might actually retain that and not realizing that that didn't actually lead to their enlightenment. So they might be holding on to like 10% or 20% of things that didn't actually lead to their enlightenment, but they're still doing those things because they, out of maybe respect for their teacher, they think that, oh, I'm going to do this meditation because my teacher does it, so I'll do it too. So they might have still gotten to enlightenment, but they're not fully perfectly enlightened. A Buddha is going to be fully perfectly enlightened, and that's why we refer to them in that way. Then in terms of what the teachings of the Buddha are, I'm going to teach you this, and then I'm going to teach you what the teachings of the Buddha aren't, just as an introduction to the teachings before we actually get into the teachings themselves. The teachings of the Buddha are a path to attaining enlightenment in this life through purification of the mind. Essentially what the Buddha did is he discovered these 10 individual pollutions in the mind that need to be eradicated and eliminated. And when you eradicate these through the tools and the techniques that he taught, this is where you'll see the qualities of enlightenment shining through the mind. So these are some of those qualities that you'll experience and some of the things that you experience when the mind's in the enlightened mental state. So enlightenment, it's not a destination that you attain after death. So the teachings of the Buddha, they're not a bunch of beliefs that you experience something after you die. It's about learning and training now so that you can experience results and benefits now. In this enlightened mental state, it's a mental state that you experience. It's a permanent mental state that you can attain in this life, or you can attain it at death too. Some people will attain it at death, but the goal would be to attain it during your life, because then the whole rest of your life, you can enjoy this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, where you don't experience anger and sadness and all these other discontent feelings. All these feelings here are permanently eliminated from the mind, including all the others. That all the causes and conditions that are producing these feelings have been uprooted and eliminated from the mind. Oftentimes we think these feelings are being caused by other people, but what you're going to see in the very first teaching that I'm going to share with you today that you can independently verify is that your mind is causing these feelings itself. And this is why you can eliminate them, because it's your own mind that's actually causing them. If it was everyone else who was causing these feelings, you wouldn't be able to eliminate them because it's everyone else that's causing them. But once you understand what's causing them, which you can independently verify, then you can actually eradicate them through the tools and techniques that the Buddha taught. As you're purifying the mind, you'll experience this high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind because you don't have those pollutions in the mind anymore. So having purified the mind of these 10 pollutions or these 10 fetters, then the mind will function optimally with this focus, concentration, this memory, and clarity of mind. You'll notice that as an enlightened being, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful with all people. Right now, you might find this to be challenging. Maybe if you agree with people and they do things that you want them to do, you can be polite and kind and respectful with them all day long. But someone who's doing something opposite of what you agree with, you might find it very hard to be respectful to that person. And that's just because the mind has certain pollutions there. But when you uproot those out of the mind, you can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody. And you won't be causing harm in the world. You won't be causing harm to other beings because you will fully have understood some of the teachings that I'm sharing with you, which one of them is called the natural law of Gotama, which I'll introduce you to here in a moment. You'll notice that as an enlightened being, your personal and professional relationships will be at ease. They will really blossom because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships any longer. As long as you're bitter, harsh, and hostile in your relationships, that's going to come back to you, right? So if you're bitter and harsh and hostile to mom and dad, they're going to be the same way back with you, or brothers and sisters, or boss, or coworkers, or friends, or family members. So by the time you can fully transform your mind, your relationships will be at ease. You'll live harmoniously with all the people around you. You won't have anxiety and hostility and bitterness and frustration in these relationships. That'll all have been eliminated. And the reason why is because you're eliminating what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a way to refer to the pollutions that the Buddha discovered from a high level. The most detailed description of his teachings in terms of the pollutions of mind, it's called the 10 fetters. We call it a fetter because during ancient times, if you were a prisoner, they would put a fetter around your ankle to keep you trapped in a certain area. So nowadays we put prisoners in prison cells or jail cells. But in those days, it was just an open field and they would attach the shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle. Now you'd be trapped in that area. So the Buddha calls these pollutions in the mind 10 fetters, because they're keeping you trapped in this unenlightened state where you're continually experiencing anger and frustration and sadness over and over and over again. But when we talk about these 10 fetters in detail, we call them the fetters. But when we talk about them from a high level, we refer to them as the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires, because anything unwholesome that's going on in your mind and in your life, it's coming from these 3 poisons, or these 3 unwholesome roots. When you're making decisions through craving, which is like your selfish desires, your unquenchable thirst, just wanting things for yourself, it's going to produce unwholesome results because you're just craving it. You're longing and yearning and wanting this thing for your own satisfaction. Or when you make decisions through anger, right? If you've been bitter and harsh and hostile through your intention, speech, and actions, you can see it produces unwholesome results. You have broken relationships or difficulties and struggles. So when you have anger, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And where all this is coming from is often referred to as ignorance, although I don't tend to use this word. I use the unknowing of true reality, because ignorance is kind of like a derogatory word, and a Buddha wouldn't refer to people in a negative, degrading, and diminishing way. So the best way to think about this is like misunderstanding or confusion, or this unknowing of true reality, or lack of wisdom. That the whole reason why craving and anger continues to exist in the mind is because of this lack of wisdom. The mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So because of this lack of wisdom, the mind just stays stuck in this continuous cycle that it longs and yearns and it wants something. And if it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, and others. But if it doesn't get what it wants, you get angry, you get sad, you get frustrated, you feel guilty or shameful or stress or anxiety. And now this cycle just continues to go on and on and on and on, because when this anger is arising, you become bitter and harsh and hostile to others. So it's all coming from this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. So that's why on the path to enlightenment, you're encouraged to cultivate wisdom, that you're not a follower, you're not a devotee, you're not believing in teachings. Instead, you're learning them, you're examining them, you're investigating them. Then you're reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And then you practice them, integrating them into your life and training your mind. So I'm going to teach you how to do that when we get into the first teaching today. So this purification of the mind is occurring through training of the mind, and these are some of the qualities that you'll experience. One of the main things that you're awakening to the wisdom of is what we refer to as the natural law of Gama. You might have heard this referred to as karma. Well, the word karma is from the Sanskrit language. The word Gama is from the Pali language. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So anybody who studies those will tend to use the word Gama. If this translated to just one English word, I would just use that because it'd be easy for everybody, but it doesn't translate to just one English word, so I still need to use the word Gama. This word Gama, it means cause and effect, or action and result. Everything you experience, there's some cause. The cause is your decisions. You're going to make a certain decision, and now there's going to be some effect or some results, right? This is cause and effect, or action and result, essentially the results of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Gama is. There's no being who's overseeing this. It's not punishments. It's not rewards. It's not anything mystical or magical. It's not anything to believe in. It's understanding these cause and effect. So this is part of what's referred to as the natural laws of existence. So when we talk about cultivating wisdom on the path to enlightenment, you're cultivating the wisdom of these natural laws. So the Buddha is teaching you the way the world is so that you understand how the world is. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be, and that if you learn and practice certain rules or commandments, that the world will become a better place if everybody follows certain rules or commandments. Instead, he's explaining to you the way the world is. Sometimes people think that a teacher like the Buddha is explaining the way the world should be, and that if we all practice or follow these rules or commandments, then we would experience peace and joy. But that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. He's teaching you about this natural law so that then you can experience the wisdom of understanding how this law functions. And much like the natural law of gravity, when you grew up, you struggled and had difficulties with this. You fell down because you didn't understand this natural law of gravity. You broke toys. You knocked over glasses of water. You had all kinds of struggles because you didn't understand this natural law of gravity. Well, eventually, you fully awoke. You had this wisdom now of the natural law of gravity, and that's why you can navigate the world very easily, very readily, because you've now fully awoke. But when we were 2 years old, 3 years old, we weren't awake to the natural law of gravity. That's why we struggled and had difficulties with it. So these natural laws, the mind in the unenlightened state is unawake to them. It's unaware of them. It doesn't have the wisdom of these natural laws. So when you awaken to this wisdom through learning, through examining and investigating, through reflecting, where you independently verify that the teachings are true or false, and then when you practice them, this is where you'll see the improvement to the condition of your mind in the condition of your life, because you're going to notice that your relationships are more at ease. So the Buddha didn't explain the way the world should be, but instead he explained how the world is. Then in terms of training the mind, you can experience this peace and joy through acquiring wisdom of these natural laws. Like I mentioned, when the mind's angry or sad or frustrated or feeling guilt or shame or fear or stress or anxiety, this is just because you're struggling. Your mind just doesn't have certain wisdom that it needs in order to overcome that obstacle. So the teachings of the Buddha are to help you cultivate wisdom about how the way the world is, not how the way the world should be. Okay? The teachings of the Buddha are timeless. He spoke very clear, he spoke very concise, and he spoke very precise. You don't need to interpret his teachings. You don't have to figure out what it is that he was trying to tell you. When you read his actual words, it's very clear. It's very concise. It's very precise. And his teachings are timeless because he's describing these natural laws. The natural laws haven't changed since the time of his life until now. It's the exact same natural laws that he's describing. So that's why his teachings are timeless. They apply during his life, they apply now, and long into the future. These natural laws will still apply. He did teach about the cycle of rebirth, and he taught about these 5 realms of existence. He taught about hell, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, which we can think about like ghosts and things like that, human realm, and then the heavenly realm. And he taught about these things for a reason. The cycle of rebirth is true. You can actually independently verify this. Right now, you might not have the wisdom of how to do that, but as you learn and practice on the path, there's ways for you to independently verify that this continuous cycle is actually true. In fact, you might have already experienced something in your life. If you know what deja vu is, where you've had kind of like a memory, like you're doing something and you're like, whoa, this feels so familiar, but you know you haven't done it in this life. This is a residual memory from your past life that's bubbling up to the surface of the mind, that you've done this thing, but it wasn't in this life. So there's other ways. This is just a simple thing to share with you guys that you may have already had this experience to help you see that the cycle of rebirth is actually true and it's actually real. He taught these 5 realms of existence for a reason, because that his teachings, as you're learning and practicing and you're clearing out the pollution of your mind, you might actually observe your past lives. You can actually observe certain things. So if you started having memories of this vivid experience of where you were murdered and you didn't understand that this was a past life, this could really shake you up. Because as you're getting rid of this pollution out of your mind, it's not uncommon for people to see their past lives, because there's been countless past lives that we've all lived. And if you start having these vivid memories of, say, being murdered or raped or something like this, it could really shake you up. Or sometimes as you're training your mind and getting rid of this pollution, you might actually experience communication with these beings in these other realms. So hell beings, afflicted spirits, which are like ghosts, heavenly beings, they can communicate with you. Because why we call them realms, it's not like they're really far away in some distant land. They're right here in the same time and space as us. So just like a human being is sitting in this chair, if I got up and left, maybe an animal would come and sit here. Just the same thing, like a hell being, an afflicted spirit, or a heavenly being. They're right here in the same time and space as all of us. So he taught you this because you might experience communication from these beings, where people nowadays are associating that with schizophrenia and things like that, that there's certain voices that they hear. This is like if you were at a dinner and 2 tables over at a restaurant, somebody was talking kind of loud, you could train your mind to ignore that and just focus on your conversation. But if you're hearing these voices that other people don't hear and you don't know how to ignore it, it can really shake you up in your mind. And then the third thing is that you might actually see these beings at some point. They're formless beings, but some people can see hell beings, afflicted spirits, or heavenly beings. Maybe you've already seen a ghost or a heavenly being or something like this, or had communication with hell beings. If you've experienced these things and you didn't know that they existed, then it could shake you up. So remember, the Buddha is explaining the way the world is. He's explaining that these things exist so that when you encounter it, then you'll know that it's normal and there's nothing to be shaken up by it. But what I do is I suggest for you guys to set the cycle of rebirth to the side. When you're first starting on the journey like this, it's not important to independently verify the cycle of rebirth when you first get started. You can just set it to the side. Probably for the first year and a half, 2 years, you can just set it to the side, because there's core central teachings to be able to learn and grow and develop and understand that you'd like to approach those first and work with those. And then over time, as you train your mind and you start experiencing more and more improvement, that might be the time to then approach the cycle of rebirth and address it then. So in this book series that I share, it's 13 books. I share a little bit about it in the first book, but the most content on the cycle of rebirth is in volume 11. It's in volume 11 of the 13 books for a reason, because that's a better time to approach it and understand it. But just understand that this is something that the Buddha taught, because it is the truth. The Buddha taught about God, but he didn't make God a central role in his teaching. Sometimes people think the Buddha didn't teach about God. Right? Sometimes you hear people say that the Buddha rejected God, or the Buddha claims that there's no existence of God and there's no God in the teachings of the Buddha. Anybody who shares these things, they haven't studied the original teachings of the Buddha, because if you look in his original teachings, he mentions God. He talks about him as the all-knowing and the all-powerful. He talks about him as the creator, but he doesn't put God as a central figure in his teachings, because it's not God who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's your decisions that determine that. So instead of putting God at the center of his teachings, he puts you at the center of his teachings, because it's you that's learning and practicing. So he doesn't put God at the center of his teachings, but he does mention about God. So you can have a relationship with this being and get to enlightenment if you like, or not, right? Just like your neighbor. You could have a relationship with your neighbor or not. It's up to you. And if you have a relationship with your neighbor, it's pretty nice, because you'll have a friend, you'll have somebody that you can get help from, and someone to look over your house when you go on vacation and things like this. But if you don't have a relationship with your neighbor, that's okay too. You'll be completely fine. So the same thing is true with God, right? If you have a relationship with this being, it'll help you, but it's not required in order to get to enlightenment. So that's why he didn't make God as a central role in his teachings. The most complete and largest collection of the teachings of the Buddha is in something called the Pali Canon. There's 45 large volumes that are about this thick that contain his original teachings. It's called the Pali Canon. And the reason why is because the original language that they're captured in is called Pali. So they call it the Pali Canon. The language of Pali isn't a spoken language anymore. So these teachings have been translated into other languages. So we have English Pali Canon. It's the Pali Canon in English. We also have it in Thai, and we have it in other languages as well. So it's his discourses that were documented after his death, that during his lifetime they didn't write things down because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. So nowadays we have all this modern technology, but at one time the technology just to write things down didn't exist. That's not even technology to us anymore, right? But that was technology to them, right? So it existed in China, but it hadn't made its way to that region of the world. The Buddha was born in what we refer to as Nepal, and he taught in Northeast India. So it just hadn't made its way to that part of the world. Everything he taught was oral. But if you learn how to get to enlightenment and you train your mind, you won't forget all that wisdom. By the time you fully transform your mind, you'll never forget what it took for you to get to enlightenment. So by the time he died, there was countless people who had gotten to enlightenment, and 500 of them came together and documented his teachings, because by that point, the technology had made its way into that part of the world. So they documented his teachings at that point. So that's what we refer to as the Pali Canon. This book series that I share, it consolidates those 45 volumes down into 13 books. And these are much more manageable and easy for someone to digest, because in the Pali Canon, you see a lot of repetition. You can read about 100 pages And there can sometimes just be the same thing being repeated over and over with like one sentence changing or one word changing. And the reason why is because this is how you help people to learn in an oral tradition. The Buddha taught orally. What you do is you give people lists. That's why we have like the 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Precepts, the 10 Fetters, the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, the 3 Poisons. You give people lists, because if you give a list and someone remembers 4 out of the 5 things, they're going to know we're missing one. What is it? Right? So you give people lists. That's one of the ways to help people learn in an oral tradition. The other way is that you give them stories. This is why the Buddha would tell stories, and he would explain the story that has some certain teaching to it. And this will help you to remember in an oral tradition, because you'll remember the story. And then the third way you help someone remember an oral tradition is you say it over and over and over again. So by him repeating himself over and over and over again, it helped people to remember what it is that he taught. So when they wrote down the teachings, they wrote it down in a repetitive nature. So that's why there's 45 volumes. It would probably take you a good 10 years to read it all. And then not to mention understand it and practice it and train your mind with these things. So that's why we can consolidate it nowadays into a smaller amount. And then it's not as difficult for you to put your arms around it and figure it out and how to learn it and how to understand it and practice it. So these 45 large volumes of books, the average person doesn't actually have the entire collection of Pali Canon. Because if you grew up in a Christian background, for example, there's a Bible. It's like one book. It's like this big. It's really like 66 books within one book, but it's really just one book, right? And pretty much everybody has a Bible if you're Christian, right? Even hotels have them sitting around, in the hotel room. But the Pali Canon isn't that way because it's so expensive to print out. So here in Thailand, like the average person doesn't even have access to the original words of the Buddha, because it would cost you about 3 months of your salary to print this out. And you probably don't own a book collection worth 3 months of your salary. So the average Thai person doesn't even have the Pali Canon. Even the average temple, they don't have the Pali Canon because it's so expensive to print it out. But nowadays with modern technology, we can put it on the internet and people can download it for free because it's just a file on your hard drive. We have printed versions where people just reimburse us for our printing cost, and that's about it. So the printing cost of 13 books that are smaller is much less than 45 books of very large voluminous collection. So that's why we've consolidated it into a smaller subset of what he actually was teaching. And this is what you would need in order to be able to get to enlightenment, is this collection of teachings. So lastly, in terms of what the teachings of the Buddha are, is the teachings of the Buddha are to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. This is one of the ways to think about the teachings of the Buddha, that it's a self-help program, right? It's been around for 2,500 years. It's well vetted. It's been well looked at and talked about and discussed. So the way that I think about it is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. By the time you get to enlightenment, it's physically impossible for you to feel sadness. It's physically impossible for you to be angry or frustrated or irritated because the causes and conditions that are producing that have been uprooted. Sometimes people think that it's love that's causing sadness in some cases, but it's not love. You guys are going to see here in a moment what's actually causing this, and it's not love, because love is this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Sometimes when people die, they think that what's causing them to feel sad is because they love this person. But you're going to see that this isn't true, and you're going to be able to independently verify it. That's part of that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality, that the mind thinks that, oh, I loved my grandmother, and that's why I'm sad when she died. But that's just not true. So I'll help you to be able to see it in a way that you can independently verify why your mind's experiencing that. So you can heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. So this is what the teachings of the Buddha are. But now let me share with you what the teachings of the Buddha are not, because this is going to help you to understand what they are, to understand what they aren't. They're not a collection of beliefs, doctrine, concepts, opinions, or views that will produce this pleasant afterlife if you believe in them. And it's also not going to produce this unpleasant afterlife if you don't believe in them, right? So the teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs or opinions and views, that if you believe in these things, then you'll have this great, wonderful afterlife. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about an afterlife. It's about right now, in your life right now, to learn and practice and gain wisdom and produce a more peaceful life now, today, in this life. His teachings also aren't religion. In my opinion, what religion is it's like an organization that one person is at the top. They've collected a certain amount of teachings, and now this person at the top is going to tell everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing in their life. A religion typically is going to have rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. A religion is typically going to have rules and commandments that everyone must follow, and they might think that this is what's going to create a peaceful world. Well, if this is the way you think about religion, the Buddha's teachings aren't religion, because there's not one person at the top. There's not even one organization, right? There's just a bunch of teachers who are sharing what the Buddha taught. There are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in the teachings of the Buddha. If you've been in places where they're doing those things and they're attributing them to Buddhist teachings, the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But you could go to a temple that considers itself Buddhist, and you might see these things being done. But if you go back to his original teachings, those aren't what the Buddha actually taught, because his goal is to help you gain wisdom. And rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't produce wisdom. These are just ceremonies that people are doing. So he never did any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship. And he didn't teach rules and commandments, because if you look at the teachings of the Buddha as a rule, then you're missing the underlying meaning of why he's teaching you what it is that he's teaching you. So if you think of religion this way, the Buddha's teachings are not religion. It's this better way of life. When he awoke to enlightenment, he didn't say, hey, I discovered a new religion. He said, hey, I discovered a better way of life and how to train your mind to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. After he died, people turned it into a religion, right? So the Buddha himself wasn't a Buddhist, just like Jesus Christ wasn't a Christian, right? Other people created those things after they died. They were just teachers that helped us to learn how to live a better way of life. The teachings of the Buddha, they're not about punishments and rewards. Sometimes when you're learning things like this, people might try to guilt, shame, or fear you into doing a particular thing through punishments and rewards. That's not what the Buddha did. He's helping you to be able to train your mind and get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. They're also not this mystical or magical thing. It's not superstition or auspicious things. It's not something that you can force other people to do or try to convince other people to do. It's also not these short, catchy phrases that will produce some benefit. Like if you ever surfed on social media like Facebook, you might see this short little catchy phrase, and then they'll say Buddha. Like the Buddha said this thing. But when you research them, 99.9% of them, the Buddha never said. People are just attributing it to him because maybe it'll make someone pay attention to it a little bit closer if they do that. The Buddha taught in very clear English. He taught in sentences. He didn't teach these little short, catchy phrases that sometimes people share. His teachings also aren't stuck in a cultural past that degrades or judges other people. Sometimes you might hear people say, oh, the teachings of the Buddha degrade women or something like this. I have never seen anywhere in the teachings of the Buddha where he degraded anybody or talked negatively about anybody once he got to enlightenment, because he's fully awake, he's wise. If he denigrates or diminishes or degrades a woman, that's not what an enlightened being would do. So you'll never see anywhere in his teachings where he degrades women or any ethnic group or anything like that. In fact, you'll see just the opposite. He's teaching men how to take very good care of their wives. He's teaching women how to take good care of their husbands and things like this. So his teachings aren't based on a cultural past. They're based on these natural laws of existence. So when you read his teachings, if you ever decide to read some of his original words, you'll never see anything that's denigrating or degrading any particular person or judging other people. Okay? So this is what the teachings of the Buddha are not and what they are. Do you guys have any questions on any of this? No? For those of you guys online, if you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or if you're in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Let me see if we have any questions here online. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay. So normally what I do at this point is I take a little break, but we just went through that pretty quickly in just about 30 minutes. Would you guys like to just move right into the teachings of the Buddha, or would you like to take a little stretch break, a little bathroom break? He's already on break. He's actually studied this before. You guys would like to keep going? This next piece will take me about 45 minutes to actually teach it to you. And then we'll actually be done. So we'll probably finish up, probably like an hour prior to what we originally planned. Does that work for you guys? Okay, let's do it that way. Okay, so the Four Noble Truths is the very first teaching of the Buddha. This is what we call establishing right view. Because what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to see through this teaching that I share with you, you're going to be able to understand the problem in your mind that the Buddha discovered. You understand the cause of the problem. You understand the elimination of it, and you understand the path forward and how to completely fix it. Of course, you won't know how to fix it 100% by the time we're done today, but you'll at least know what is going to fix it by the time that we finish today. So when you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, it's important you don't believe anything that you learn. Like when I'm talking with you and you're reading the books I write, don't believe anything. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. Because either you convinced yourself to believe it or someone else convinced you to believe it. So with belief, you won't know what's true or false. What you're interested in doing is getting to wisdom. And that's what's going to help you to awaken. So I'm going to show you how to do that with this teaching so that you can see how to learn something, how to reflect on it to independently verify it, and then how to practice it to be able to train your mind. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And just like with the natural law of gravity, where you needed to do that, you needed to awaken to wisdom, you need to do that with all these teachings too. So in order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you need to first understand the three universal truths. What I'm going to be sharing with you is this step right here called right view. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha. It's called the Eightfold Path, and it's 8 individual steps. What I'm going to be teaching you today is called right view. It's the very first teaching of the Buddha. This Eightfold Path is organized into 3 sections, which is called wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. So now, today, you're going to get the wisdom of what is the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. But then there's also moral conduct that you study. But whenever you see the Buddha teaching moral conduct, you should never think about it as rules or commandments. He's teaching you about how you could potentially cause harm to others. And if you cause harm, harm's going to come back to you. So improving your moral conduct is to eliminate the harm that you're causing people through your speech, through your actions, and through your livelihood. A livelihood is like how you choose to sustain your life. Because if you're causing harm through your livelihood, it's going to come back to you. And then there's this mental discipline where he's helping you to understand how to train your mind, because that's what's going to help you to practice the moral conduct. It's not possible for you to just snap your fingers and improve your speech. It's just not possible. You need to train your mind first, and then it's going to help you to be able to then put into action any of the moral conduct. So what I'm going to teach you today is just called right view. In order to understand right view, which is the Four Noble Truths, you need to first understand the 3 universal truths. We call them truths because I know that they're truth, the Buddha know that they're true, other people know that they're true, but this is why you need to know that they're true. And you can't get to that through belief. So I'm going to show you how to learn, reflect, and practice. So this first one here, called the universal truth of impermanence. I'm going to teach it to you. It'll take me all of about 1 minute or 2 minutes to teach it to you. What the universal truth of impermanence is where you're understanding the world around you. Things are constantly changing, that there isn't a permanent state. This is a universal truth, that everything in the world around you is constantly changing. Things arise, they change, and they fade away. This is called a conditioned object, that everything around you. You can look around. You can independently verify this, right? This is where you start reflecting on it. So what I've just shared with you is things around you are constantly changing. But now you need to be able to reflect on it. So what I encourage you to do is think about things that you know in the world and decide whether they're permanent or they're impermanent. So for example, this human body. Is this human body exactly the same your entire life, meaning it's permanent? Or has it been constantly changing, meaning it's impermanent? What would you say? It's constantly changing, right? It's impermanent, okay? What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? It's constantly changing. What about your bank account? Same thing, right? It's impermanent, going up and down and up and down. What about your relationships? Have people been exactly the same people in your life your whole life, meaning your relationships are permanent, or your relationships impermanent, meaning people are coming and going in and out of your life? Impermanent, right? So you could go around and you can see this everywhere around you. Like, look at the walls of the temple. You can see marks on them. At one time, it was probably brand new, right? Brand new, fresh coat of paint, solid wall. But now there's marks and holes and things like this. You can see the floor. You can see the different color of wood planks on the floor. This is all impermanence. You can walk down the street and you can see a crack in the sidewalk. That's impermanence. Or if you look at a fence and you see the paint is fading, this is impermanence, right? So this is a key thing to understand. This is describing conditioned objects, that all conditioned objects are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away. There is something called unconditioned objects. Enlightenment itself is an unconditioned object. It doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. In the natural laws of existence, same thing. That's why the teachings of the Buddha are timeless, because what he described 2,500 years ago hasn't changed to now. Now, people's memories and the people's books and stuff like that, that's changed because of impermanence, but the actual natural laws themselves haven't actually changed. So these are called unconditioned objects, right? So everything in the world, meaning around you, all material things are impermanent. But there is something called unconditioned objects like enlightenment and the natural laws that are permanent. These are called unconditioned objects. So you can independently verify this and see that everything around the world is impermanent. And this is going to be key when you understand the Four Noble Truths. You need to understand this as like a building block to help you. Then the second universal truth is called discontentedness. This is helping you to understand the unenlightened mind. The unenlightened mind is going to experience three feelings: a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or a feeling that is neither painful nor pleasant. These are the three feelings that one experiences. Pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. These are very pleasant to experience. Then there's painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. Very painful to experience these. Then there's neither painful nor pleasant. And I put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's pretty painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category if you like. But shyness is probably a good example. It's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or say you were sitting on public transportation and somebody you don't know came and sat really close to you and your body was touching their body. You might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. You're kind of uncomfortable in that situation. You're dissatisfied. That's what that third one is. So this here is describing what the unenlightened mind experiences. And you can independently verify this because you know your mind's unenlightened. And you can ask yourself, does this explain what I experience? Do I experience these three things? Is there any feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories? Right? So you can see that the Buddha is describing for you what you experience as a universal truth. All unenlightened beings will experience discontentedness. Okay? Some people refer to this as suffering. If you've ever studied the teachings of the Buddha in other places, you might hear them refer to this as suffering. I don't use this word because it doesn't describe what the Buddha was teaching. The original word in the Pali Canon is dukkha. You might have heard this if you've been studying the teachings of the Buddha. And people will tend to translate that to suffering. But when you look at what the Buddha taught about this topic of dukkha, he taught these three feelings: pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. So if we use the word suffering, in my opinion, it describes the painful feelings really well, but it doesn't describe the pleasant feelings or the neither painful nor pleasant. Because when you're happy or excited, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. Or if that person came and sat next to you on the bus and your body was touching their body, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering. But you're discontent. You're experiencing discontentedness, or your mind is discontented. Have you ever been so happy and excited you like fell down? Or you've been so happy and excited you couldn't think clear? Right? This is what's going on when your mind's discontent, because you're so excited and so happy you can't even think clear. Right? This is what the Buddha is teaching you here in this universal truth. So you can independently verify that one for yourself, that that's what unenlightened beings experience. Then there's this universal truth of non-self. This one takes a little bit more time to understand, and you may or may not understand it by the time we're done here talking. What this is this is the solution to a certain problem that the Buddha discovered in the mind. Remember, there's the 10 fetters. The very first one is called personal existence view. This is a pollution in the mind where the mind clings and holds on to this body and this mind, thinking that this is who you are. So the mind thinks like this image, this self-image is who you are as a person. And now you cling to it, wanting it to be permanent. So if you've ever been, say, in a public situation, like a social setting, and you spilled something on your clothes, if you were embarrassed, this is because of personal existence view. The mind wanted to be perceived in the world a certain way. The mind's clinging to this body, thinking this is who you are, and now you feel shaken up when you're in that situation. Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw like a pimple or a mole or a wrinkle or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair, or you got a little extra fat here and there, you might have been shaken up by that. That's the personal existence view, where you're clinging to this image of thinking that this body is you, when the Buddha is teaching you not to form your inner feelings based on this body, because this body is impermanent. It's going to be constantly changing. So if you cling to this body, wanting it to be permanent, when you experience these changes, then you'll be shaken up by it. The same thing occurs with the self-identity in the mind. You might cling to a certain identity, like I am Chinese, or I am American, or I'm not sure where you're from. Where are you from? Netherlands. What do they call people from your country? Dutch. I am Dutch, right? If you cling to that identity of who you are, now when you hear people saying something positive, you're like, they're talking about me. I am Dutch. They're saying all Dutch people are friendly and kind and loving. Oh, wow, that's who I am. But then it's only a matter of time before you hear something negative or degrading or disparaging. And if you identify with that's who you are as a person, now you'll be frustrated, you'll be irritated or annoyed. Or say you have a certain job or occupation, and now when you're doing that job, you'll feel good because I am a police officer or I am a lawyer. But now when you retire or you get laid off or you get injured and you can't do that job anymore, you'll feel kind of lost, because you'll feel like a part of you is missing. You won't feel whole anymore, right? This is because the mind's clinging to this as an identity. Or if you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, when you guys separated, you might have felt lost when you were out of this relationship because you identified with, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. And now when you were single, you don't identify that way anymore. So you wanted to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So you might have wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because your mind was clinging to this identity of I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And the mind thought the way to solve this is to hurry up and get back into another relationship. But what the Buddha is teaching you here is the true way to solve this is to don't identify with this is who you are as a person, not the body and not the mind. Because if you can train your mind to eliminate this, now you can be peaceful if you're in a relationship or not, if you look a certain way or not, if the body appears a certain way or not. As you age, you're not going to always be youthful and look youthful. You're going to get older and fatter and grayer and lose your hair and things like this. But if you cling to any of this stuff thinking this is you, when you experience change, the mind will be shaken up by that. And because of impermanence, everything's going to be constantly changing around you. So as soon as you allow your mind to cling to any of this stuff, you'll be shaken up by that because these things are going to change. Okay, so any questions on any of these three? These are building blocks to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. No questions? No questions? Okay. So now let's move to the next thing. This is just one more thing that I need to teach you in order to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. This is something called craving, desire, attachment, or expectations, wants, holding, grasping, clinging. This is something that the mind's doing where the mind is longing and yearning for something. It's chasing after the objects of your affection. It's pulling towards something, thinking that this external thing is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases and chases and chases and chases and chases after it. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst. The mind experiences these painful feelings and it's like, I know what'll solve it. I need more money. That's what I need. I need more money. So it'll chase after that. Or, oh, I know what I need. A boyfriend or girlfriend. That's what I need. It'll chase after that. Or I know what I need. A new job or a new house or a new car. If you've ever been in the mall and you saw like a brand new pair of shoes or a new watch or a computer or a phone or some jewelry, and you're like, oh, I just gotta have that. I want that so badly. That's the craving, the desire. You know what I'm talking about? You experienced this before? Yeah. Okay, so it's inside the mind. It's not the object. It's not the phone. The phone's not the craving. It's inside the mind, longing, yearning for the phone. Okay, so this is what a craving, desire, attachment is. And this is going to be a building block to now help you understand the Four Noble Truths. This is where you're going to understand the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. Okay, so the problem is the first noble truth. This is the problem. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness, essentially conditioned feelings. The conditioned feelings are those pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. And they're based on some condition, right? So if it's sunny outside, you'll be so happy. But then when it's raining, you'll be sad and frustrated or angry. Or if your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy. But then when your bank account balance is here, you're sad. This is the problem, the discontentedness, the up and down and up and down. The second noble truth is explaining the cause of that problem. Discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. So that discontentedness, the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, is caused by craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, because the mind wants things to be permanent, but yet everything around you is impermanent, right? So let me give you some examples of this. Back to the boyfriend or girlfriend, right? When you first got into your relationship, pleasant feelings, feel great, right? Oh, this new person is taking an interest in me. They're sending me messages. We're going out on dates together. We're going to the movies, to dinner. We're going to the park. We're having these great conversations. You might even have intimate contact together. Pleasant feelings, nothing but pleasant feelings. But somewhere along the line, there's these cravings, these desires, things you want from them and things they want from you. And when they get fulfilled, you're happy. When you get what you want, you're happy. But when you don't get what you want, you feel sad, you feel angry, you feel frustrated. So when you guys were together, you felt happy because you were getting your craving fulfilled. But then when you guys separated, this is where you're angry or sad, or you felt lonely, or you felt bored. Not because of the love, but because the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting this relationship to be permanent, when in reality, it's impermanent. Even if you guys were together for the rest of your life, more likely than not, one of you would have died first. So if your mind's craving permanence, then when this other person died, you would be sad. Not because of the love. It's because the mind is holding on and craving permanence. The same thing like when grandma and grandpa die, same thing. The mind's craving permanence. Or if you've ever been to a wedding and you saw people crying, or if you were crying and upset at a wedding, it's because you're craving permanence. You're wanting brothers and sisters and people to be with you permanently. And now at this wedding, they're going off into the world with somebody else. Oh, you feel so, joyful potentially, but you're crying, you're feeling sorrow and grief because the mind is holding on and wanting this to be permanent. And now the ceremony, you feel this distance where the person is going off into the world with somebody else. Or if you've ever been dropped off at university and your parents were crying or you were crying, right? Like think back to, I don't know if you guys can think back to when you were in kindergarten or when you're going to school for the first time. When children go to school, they're usually crying and upset because they want mom and dad to be permanent. And now they're going off to school and they're crying. They're so upset when they go to school, right? Because they're holding on to this permanence. Here's another example. Say you get a brand new car. In this brand new car, you feel so great. It's the perfect car, right? You go to the store, you saved up all your money, you purchase this car, you drive off the parking lot, and now you park it at a store, and you go inside and you come out, and there's a scratch on your car. Oh, you might be frustrated. This is the perfect car, right? Well, it's not the scratch that's causing the frustration. And it's not the person who scratched your car. That's not what's causing your frustration. What's causing the frustration is the mind wants this car to be permanently beautiful. It's craving permanence. And it just doesn't live in that world, right? The Buddha is explaining to you the way the world is. The way the world is that everything around you is impermanent. But the mind craves permanence. It wants things to be permanent. So we're not talking in this case about what's wise or unwise, because obviously it's wise to never scratch someone's car. But we live in an impermanent world. This car is going to get scratched at some point, right? The wind's going to blow a shopping cart into your car, or something's going to happen and this car is going to get scratched. So if you crave permanence, your mind's going to be all shaken up, right? It's going to be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. Whereas if you understand that, hey, this is impermanence, now you can calmly make some decisions. Did somebody leave a note? Let me check. Or should I go talk to the security guards? Maybe there's a camera that can show me who scratched my car. Or maybe I can just take it to the insurance and the insurance company will fix it, right? But if you're angry and you're sad and you're frustrated, you're going to go into the security guards and you're going to speak in unskillful ways, and they're not going to help you. They're not going to be interested in helping you, right? But if you can remain calm and composed, now you can handle this issue because it's just impermanence. That's all it is, right? So there's countless situations that you've been in over the course of your life where you might have been blaming other people for your anger and your sadness. But in reality, it's your own mind that's causing this. When you don't have the wisdom that your own mind is causing these discontent feelings, you will tend to push people away. And you probably have done this in your life, thinking that these painful feelings you experience are being caused by this person, and you might have pushed them out of your life, or you might have pushed the situation out of your life, and it didn't solve the problem. Because remember, the problem is discontentedness, and you still get discontent. Because if this person is the problem, when you push them out of your life, you wouldn't get angry anymore, because you've just solved your problem. But that's not the real cause of the problem. That's why it hasn't been solved yet. Or another thing you might do is you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people. This is almost like an animal, like growling and roaring at another animal, trying to fear that animal into doing things your way. Because the unenlightened mind thinks that if I can just get my cravings fulfilled, if this person does things my way, everything will be perfect. So you might be arguing and trying to convince this other person to change what they're doing in order to get things done your way. Or the third thing you might do is you might put your expectations on someone and try to control them to do things your way. And this is just because of the lack of wisdom. The mind just doesn't understand what's causing its real discontent feelings. It doesn't understand. It has that lack of wisdom, that unknowing of true reality. So this second noble truth and all these others, you can independently verify it. You can look at situations where you've been angry, where you've been sad, you've been frustrated, or even you've been happy and excited. And you can see that it's your own cravings, your own desires. So you can take a moment right here and reflect. Think about a recent time when you've been angry or frustrated. Maybe this morning, maybe yesterday, maybe last week. There was something your mind wanted in that situation. And then if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, you were sad or frustrated or agitated. Now, typically what we're doing with a lack of wisdom is we're going to blame somebody else. So at that time, you might have been trying to blame somebody else for what you were experiencing. But now with these fresh eyes and this new wisdom, look at that same situation and figure out, what was it that you wanted? That you either got it and you got really happy and really excited that you got it, or you didn't get it. And because you didn't get it, you experienced painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, or stress, or anxiety, or some other thing. And this is how you can independently verify the teachings of the Buddha. And if you're having trouble to independently verify it, let me know. I will help you. Because sometimes students will raise their hand and say, hey, I have this situation. Right? I had one student one time that said, they went to work and their house looked a certain way. And when they came home, their wife had this craft project all over the house, and they got frustrated because when they walked in, the house didn't look the same way that it did when they left for work. And I was like, they were like, how did I cause my own frustration? I wasn't even there. I just walked in and I got frustrated right away. And I was like, yeah, your mind's craving for your house to look a certain way permanently. And it can't look that way permanently. It's just not possible. And just like it couldn't look that way permanently, the way that it looks now, that's not permanent either. Your wife will put things away, or maybe you'll help her to put it away, right? But if your mind's craving the house to look a permanent way, when you walk in and it doesn't look that way, yeah, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be annoyed and agitated. So this is the second noble truth, helping you to see that your mind is causing your own discontentedness. Then the third noble truth is explaining to you that the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. Because if the cause of the problem is craving, desire, attachment, the way to eliminate that problem is to eliminate the cause. The cause is craving, desire, attachment. So the Buddha has a whole host of teachings that are going to teach you how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And that's what the fourth noble truth is. The fourth noble truth is explaining to you the complete solution is the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path are these 8 individual steps that are going to guide you in how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment from the mind. You would need each individual step. But the very first step is right view. Because without right view, why would you implement anything else? If you thought that everybody else was causing you to be angry, why would you train your mind? Because it's everyone else that's causing you to be angry. But if you can start with right view, realizing your mind is causing your own discontentedness, now it makes complete sense why you need to train your mind. So what right view is to understand your mind's causing your own discontentedness. Wrong view would be everybody else is causing your discontentedness. That would be wrong view, right? So right view is to come in contact with the Four Noble Truths, understanding that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing these discontent feelings. And they can be completely eliminated from your mind. Whereas if it was everyone else that was causing these feelings, you might feel like you need to go out and teach other people to do things your way. But there's 8 billion people in the world. You can't teach them all to do things your way. So by you focusing on the real problem, which is your own discontentedness, understanding the cause of that problem is your craving, desire, attachment, working on eliminating the craving, desire, attachment through the Eightfold Path, now you can get a real solution. You can see the peacefulness coming into the mind because you're applying the real tools and techniques that it's going to take to get rid of it. And this is where, as you bring down your cravings, desires, attachments, your peacefulness and joy will go up. Because in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy if this condition is met, and this condition is met, and this condition is met, and this condition is met. If my boyfriend or girlfriend does this, if my mom and dad does this, if my boss does this, if my bank account is this, if the weather is this, then I will be happy, right? So the amount of time you can be happy becomes less and less and less and less and less. This is why some people, when they get older, they become more grumpy and more irritable because their expectations grow. But you can eliminate all of these cravings, desires, attachments, and get to the point where you're joyful and you're peaceful. You don't have to be old and grumpy. You can be old and cheerful, right? That's an option, but it's up to you to decide if that's what you would like to do. So the teachings of the Buddha are here to help you heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. But you need to know what hurt you. What hurt you is inside your own mind. It's not these outside things. And that's not to say that other people aren't doing things unwisely. Surely there's people who are doing things in the world that are unwise. But if you've trained your mind to not have craving, desire, attachment, you don't have to have painful feelings when someone's doing something unwise. Because if your feelings are based on what other people are doing, you will never get to peacefulness because people will never do things your way. It's not possible. So this is what the Buddha is teaching you of how to accomplish. And this is the very first teaching to establish right view. Any questions on this? No questions? You have a question, Leo? If you could get the mic. He's learned this several times. He studied with me before. They saw you laying down and relaxing. They thought something was wrong.
It's not a question, but I realized I watched a video about I think a woman in Austria who was many years a prisoner of a man and was in a small room under the carpet or something.
Yeah, like being kept slave.
Yeah, and I had these feelings of anger about this, and also after 8 years she got out, and she told story, told her story,
Mm-hmm.
and she was quite peaceful. So she was a strong character, she said, and could let go many things. But other people, because of that, mobbed her. Said, "Oh, I think you're lying. That's not true." And you wanted that because she was 10 years old when she got captured by this man.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And they say, "Oh, I think you wanted that," and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I get kind of sad and also angry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just realized that.
Yeah. So there's some craving in your mind. Maybe you want everybody in the world to be peaceful, right? And what we're talking about is craving, desire, attachment, wants, right? So that is going to lead to unhappiness. But also, if you could care less what happened to people and you could not even give a clue or care what other people, you're not going to be happy there either. So there's this middle way where you can have concern for the misfortune of others. And now you don't base your inner feelings on what happens to other people, but you have concern. Whereas if you see somebody that could need some help or use some help, you could help them. But if you're craving and desiring for that, when you walk down the street and you see a bunch of homeless people, you'll feel sad or you'll feel miserable because you want everybody in the world to be protected or peaceful or everybody to have food or something like this. So it's about the longing, yearning, the wanting, that's the craving, versus I could care less. These are on two opposite sides of the spectrum. You would like to come to the middle where there's concern. But concern doesn't necessarily mean that you take action to do something. It just means you have concern for the misfortune of others, because when you have a worried mind, the mind sees all the problems and it's discontent. Because the mind sees all the problems in the world, it's worried, right? But you can see all the problems and you can know the solutions, and now the mind can be concerned. Like I have concern for the world, but I'm not worried about them, right? Because worrying would come from craving, desire, attachment. Because I understand the problem that everyone's experiencing is craving, anger, and ignorance. That's the problem that they're all experiencing. That's the cause of their problems. And I also know the solution is that each individual person has to choose to train their mind themselves. So whoever that was that captured that girl, kidnapped her, they had craving, they had anger, and they had ignorance. Right? They are causing harm in the world through their craving, anger, and ignorance. The only way for that to get fixed is each individual needs to decide for themselves to learn and practice and train their mind. So that's why I make myself available to help people learn and practice, but I can't change other people. I can only provide you the teachings that are going to help you to do the change. So when you're worried or you're feeling sad or angry, this is usually the mind craving for the world to be a certain way, longing, yearning for it. Whereas if you're in that, if you have that craving, you're going to experience discontentedness anytime something's happening in the world that you disagree with. Maybe if there's a war, maybe you get angry or frustrated, or you see a homeless person, or you see someone addicted to drugs, or you see a child that's being abused or something like that. There's a craving for the world to be a certain way, and you need to train your mind to let that go and move to this middle where you can just have concern. But the mind doesn't typically just let go of a craving and come right to the middle. It will usually let go and it'll usually swing to the other side. And then it'll come back and come back and come back like a pendulum. And then eventually you'll get to the middle where there can be peace and joy.
Especially when these people, other people are mad to her because she was a, how you say, she was a little girl. She couldn't do anything, right? Yeah. And other people are so unfriendly to her and saying bad things to her. I forgot. What is the best way? Because I think, for me it's difficult to put this aside. Or is it love and kindness in this case that I do more love and kindness, and I have this imagine of these different people who are shouting at her, saying she's a liar or something.
So to get rid of the sadness, you have to get rid of the attachment, right? Understand that those people shouting at her and those people thinking negatively of her, that's their choice. You can't change that. That's just impermanence. For you, You think more warmly and more lovingly towards this person, but those people think hateful and resentful thoughts. That's their choice. That's just impermanence, because not everybody's going to think the same way as you. And just because they think that way, you don't have to form feelings based on what other people are thinking or how other people are acting in the world. You don't have to create feelings based on that. So you're going to need to let go of your craving, your desire, your attachment for other people to be a certain way. So that's the first part, letting go of your craving. Then yes, the sadness or anger or frustration, that's the loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness that will eliminate that from the mind.
Should I address these people? For example, in my mind, no?
There's nothing for you to do to them. Because
no, I mean in my mind, to address them through loving kindness or to letting go of craving. For example, I have imagined of these people shouting at her, and I think, okay.
Yeah. If you're going to do loving kindness meditation, you would include them in your loving kindness meditation, but that's it. You're not like talking to them. You're not having conversations with them in your mind or anything like that. So when you say address them, that's what I'm thinking about. But if you would like to include them in your loving kindness meditation, as I've taught you before, then this will help you. Okay, so let me see if anybody online has any questions. Let's see. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere online. Okay. Oh, you have another question, Leo? Go ahead.
Would like to ask a question about loving kindness.
Sure.
For example, I think you told me someday that you imagine people sometimes, or you did it in the past.
Visualization.
Yeah, visualization. You also did it with more people or more beings. For example, all beings, may they be safe. You also have a visualization of them and how you embrace them in your visualization. You
can visualize individual beings or groups of individuals. It's up to you. You don't need to use visualization in your loving kindness meditation, but you can if you'd like to. So you imagine it in your mind. You visualize it in your mind. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just in class here, even though sometimes we go longer, this was kind of short, really easy to explain it to you guys. If you guys would like to learn more, we have a course coming up on Monday where I'm going to be teaching for 5 days from 9 to 3, and I'm going to be teaching you guys all the foundational teachings that you need for the path to enlightenment. This is one of those teachings, but there's a whole bunch of other things you see here as well, and there's other things beyond this that you would need to learn. So you're welcome to attend that either here or online, because I live stream it, and if you can't attend live, it's recorded as well. You can attend that way as well. And then we have books, we have audiobooks, we have videos and podcasts, and even personal guidance if you'd like to get any of that help. Because if you'd like to eliminate your anger and sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings, this is the way to accomplish that. So just let me know what help you would like. I can guide you towards resources. They're all available at no cost for you. All the classes, courses, and retreats. We even have a class going on tomorrow, which is all about meditation at 9 a.m. So you're welcome to come for that as well. So feel free to let me know what help you guys would like and what resources you need. I have ability to share all of that with you no matter where you are in the world. Okay, so thank you guys for coming, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.